Good evening, David. Good evening, panel. With Newcastle being the largest coal exporting city in the world, it has infrastructure that other nations would be very envious of, and thousands in the Hunter Valley employed productively extracting and producing coal. My question is, how can anyone support the quick shutdown of the coal industry and the effect it'll have on this community, Newcastle and the Hunter Valley, whilst other nations remain untouched?
Ted O'Brien, let me go to you first on that.
I think, Craig, if I heard you correctly, there's sort of two parts to that. One is the export of coal, and the other is coal-fired power generators being used within the region. Look, when it comes to the export of coal, I don't believe we should be shutting that down. I think there is a moral aspect to this argument that is often not spoken about. There are countries in the world that rely on that coal just to keep the lights on. Some of these countries simply do not have electricity for their citizens. They're slowly but surely trying to get it. If they don't use Australian coal, then they're going to use substitutes that will also most likely have a worse impact on the global environment. I think we should continue to export coal, and I think the Hunter has a very important role to play in that.
Can I just clarify though, do you still support the target of net zero by 2050?
Correct, we do.
And do you support the government's net zero authority that they're setting up? Because Craig's question goes to whether you support bodies that would see the end of coal. Do you support this body?
Let's wait to see what the government delivers on it. They haven't provided the detail yet. By the title of it, sounds good. I think there is a real issue here though, and it particularly goes to the second part, if I may, which is the coal-fired power stations here in the Hunter. I mean, if you look at Liddell closing recently, and I've got no criticism of AGL, I think they actually did as good a job as any company could in looking at how to manage that for the workforce. But the majority of Liddell's workforce went to Bayswater, another coal-fired power station, and most of the others retired. And so we've got to be very careful about promises that once you close down coal-fired power stations, there's going to be a clean energy zone that's going to pick up all the workers and everyone's going to be okay. That's not going to be the case at the moment.
But isn't that why you'd need a net zero authority? I mean, even the Business Council says they support this idea to help regions like this, to help workers like this.
Yeah, again, David, I've got no criticism of an announcement that has a title. We'll have to wait to see what the detail is. But it is a real issue because we've got to be careful that people aren't sold false promises. This is going to be really tough. I have a problem with coal-fired power stations being closed before there is an alternative up and running. You don't turn off one system without having another one there in its place.
So all the coal-fired power stations that closed when you were in office?
Sorry, were they all closed?
No, the ones that did close on your watch. Did you have a problem with those as well?
Any closure of a coal-fired power station that risks reliability in the grid, increases in prices, or a workforce that's not going to be looked after, got a problem. If you look at Liddell, which while closed only a month or so ago, was announced under the Coalition's watch, we upped our investment in renewables. We invested in the Kurri Kurri gas plant. And we negotiated an extension of Liddell so it didn't close early.
All right. Anika,
these are the actions we need and we're not seeing from the current government whatsoever.
Just, Anika Wells, let me bring you to Craig's question because clearly there is a concern about the impact of some of the Labor government's policies when it comes to the transition to net zero. What do you say to those concerns?
Yeah, Craig, I'd say that Novocastrians are at the front and forefront of our thinking when it comes to how we transition to our renewable future. I mean, the Newcastle and the Hunter have powered this country for generations, and we want to make sure that you continue to power this country for generations to come. And that's why we announced the Net Zero Authority right here. That's why we've got a renewables hub at the university. You would have seen that we've gazetted for wind power. There's green hydro operating out of the port. I mean, these are all exciting opportunities using places like the University of Newcastle to help skill and transition workers through to an exciting renewables superpower. I mean, I think you said that Liddell closure just happened about a month ago. I know we're going to nuclear. I don't want to preempt you, David, it's your show, but I think, Ted, you can't run these kinds of arguments here in Newcastle without answering for Novocastrians. Is your proposal that Liddell should become a nuclear power plant?
We'll get to that. We'll get to nuclear. Sorry, we'll get to nuclear.
I'm happy to, but
can I just
David,
be
you're in the
clear
chair.
with you, Minister? Are you saying coal-fired power in Australia does need to shut down, though?
I think we have always been, I mean, I'm from Queensland, we have always been clear-eyed about needing to do this in a way that takes everyone with us.
Yes, but are you saying coal-fired power needs to shut down?
That is not what I'm saying. I'm saying that I think there's a role for it to play. It is currently doing that job, but our focus as a federal government must be where we're going, and where we're going
We're going to net zero.
renewables.
We're going to net zero.
Yeah.
Can you have net zero with coal-fired power?
Look, I'll take Chris Bowen's advice on that.
You must have an idea. You don't know whether we'll have coal-fired power?
I think that my focus has been on what we're doing with renewables. I think that the transition will allow people to continue to work in those jobs that they have here in the years to come whilst we build up our capacity to go to a renewables future.
It seems, Lord Mayor, there's some difficulty in saying we're going to stop using coal-fired power. You're the Lord Mayor of Newcastle. Are you able to say it?
Oh, absolutely. But to be very clear, there are several holes in the Shadow Minister's arguments in terms of where we export coal to and at the moment and what they use it for. Like, our major export partner is Japan. I think that they have other forms of energy and they've got their own net zero plans. I think it's a really big furphy to say that we have to export coal forever because other countries need it. We need to actually be taking leadership on this. And the leadership is because there are currently 15,000 jobs tied to that industry here in this region. And that's exactly why the Net Zero Authority is important and is a fantastic announcement. We have worked through the coalition years as a collective here in this region, setting up our own Hunter Jobs Alliance, working with different NGOs. We've adopted a climate emergency here at the City of Newcastle. We've adopted the Paris climate targets. We have done everything we can to say, this is coming, we need a plan. And the Net Zero Authority transitions those 15,000 jobs.
Well,
that's the point.
David.
Well, as promised, we are going to talk nuclear
David,
power.
Can I add something there?
Yes, just quickly.
I just think, going back to Craig's question, I don't think it can be a quick transition. It has to be something that's staged over time, and there needs to be a really strategic plan around that, and the university plays a critical role in that. There are two big pieces of work that are happening at the moment. The university in partnership with the University of New South Wales, and really thinking about what that transition might look like. And so, we need a skilled workforce to be able to transition. It might not be this generation that impacts, it might be the next, but we need, we're setting up a skilled training centre in partnership with TAFE and the state and federal governments. And so there is a plan, but it is going to take time. And we're lucky that in this region we have a university that's really going to help take the lead in that.
Yeah.
I enjoyed what you said. I agree entirely. And David, I think this is the big issue nowadays, right? The question is, how do we get to mid-century? How do we get to 2050 carbon neutrality? That demands a debate about physics, engineering, economics, an implementation plan.
With all
right?
due respect,
it
doesn't demand a debate, it demands action. We need action, not a debate.
Sure. And so if that's the case, then I ask the Minister or the Mayor, what action are we going to take? So let's take Eraring. We've talked about Liddell, that's closed. Eraring's the next one. That represents nearly 25% of New South Wales electricity. That's going to be going off the grid. 2025. There is no guarantee of a replacement. None. So my question to you is, you want action? Tell us, what action is there?
Look,
what would you like?
I have a lot of faith. I have a lot of faith in this new federal government because they have actually put money into this region. With the Net Zero Authority, they put money into hydrogen hubs at the port, they put money into R&D at the university. This is what we needed a decade ago and we didn't get it.
Well, you got $100 million for the hydrogen hub, you got money for the university, so you had all that other than this transition authority. Is that the action?
There is a lot more action needed. When you're transitioning these jobs, you've got to remember we also have had the gazettal of offshore wind here in this region.
Yes.
Now that is very significant in terms of jobs, and what you're doing when you're looking at offshore wind as an option for this region, it's actually a skill set match, which is really important when you're looking at what type of jobs are currently able to be employed in an energy-intensive industry like the Hunter region, and how do we transition those high-value jobs into similar jobs? And that's why offshore wind is so attractive. I know the Maritime Union of Australia have been campaigning for quite some time, and it took forever in your government to get the legislation through just to allow us to investigate it. And now it's finally going ahead, and that consultation has been going on now for a couple of months. These are really important steps that should have been taken years ago. And the work that this government's going to have to do is truncate the timeline of getting that work done in that transition period to meet net zero.